Financial boundaries play a critical yet often overlooked role in women's financial and emotional well-being. Research consistently shows that women are more likely to assume the role of the responsible one within families, including managing money, things like your household budgeting, absorbing financial risk, and prioritizing the collective, like the family, over personal security. Now, while often framed as resilience or grit, this pattern can leave women financially overexposed and legally vulnerable over time. I think this is such an important topic because I see this all the time in my practice. And it's not ignorance. It's the idea that by doing the right thing for the collective, things will work out. That's often how women think in families. Why wouldn't it? Or perhaps the traditional role of women in marriage and as caregivers leads us blindly away from prioritizing our personal financial security. So today we're going to address this, how setting financial boundaries isn't selfish, it's a form of protection for your emotional well-being, your financial future, and your family. I am so excited to welcome Abby Pang here today. Abby is the founder of Aluma Law and a highly respected Vancouver-based lawyer who takes a truly family-first, resolution-focused approach to her work. Her practice spans family law, personal injury, and complex civil matters, but at the core of everything, she does it helping individuals and families navigate some of the most difficult transitions in their lives with clarity, compassion, and a strong sense of empowerment. Abby's perspective is deeply personal. Having experienced a breakdown in her own family growing up, she understands firsthand how complex and emotional separation and divorce can be, and how important it is to approach these moments with intention and care. She's also an award-winning leader, recognized as the 2023 Woman of Worth Leader of the Year, and a national nominee for the YWCA Women Distinction Awards. Today, we are so fortunate to have her here to share her expertise. Abby, welcome to the Jenny Weeks podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So something really stood out when I was reading your bio. You mentioned that your father came to Canada as a refugee, and you describe yourself as having learned the meaning of grit from him. Can you tell me a little bit about what grit, what does this mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you the story quickly. So, my father actually swam across a body of water to escape poverty, if I could describe it that way. And basically, when he got to the other side, there were huge rocks, he says, and he almost didn't make it. He almost didn't. He wasn't strong enough after swimming across the body of water to then climb up those rocks to safety onto shore. And he almost didn't make it, but he did. And that's just through resilience and grit. And so I think that's a story I carry with me. And, I base my, what I do based on, my father's inspiration. And that's just to keep going and, be strong.
Wow, yeah, I think that's important in the work you do. I know that I see that when you're working through these major life transitions, that having somebody behind you to help give you that strength can be so important.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit, what did you learn from your parents' breakup?
So what I learned was that the best way to mitigate damage for two children during divorce is to maintain the relationships between each parent and child. And that can reduce the damage that a divorce can cause. With adult children, open and honest communication with them is important. To let them know what's going on, giving them the autonomy part of the decision-making process maybe might be helpful in terms of, where they're going to live or, how your life is going to be organized after a separation. But it's trickier with the younger ones because You're not really supposed to tell them about grown-up issues, and those topics can be too stressful for them or cause them, you know, contribute to adverse experiences for them. So it's a bit trickier for the younger ones, but making sure that they're maintaining relationships with the parents is really important, I think.
I'm curious, you're with your, origin story and talking about your father's grit. What did that bring into the financial model in your family's household? Was it scarcity? Was it hard work will get you? Like, give me a little sense of that. I just find that interesting.
Hard work and self-sufficiency, I think, is always something that, our parents taught us, and to just keep going through crisis, and try to get through whatever is happening around you, to just try to just be resilient and keep working hard, and getting through whatever challenges that you might have.
Well, this podcast, we try to take certain issues and look at it and frame it around our relationship with money. All right. So the key here that I like to do is to give our listeners a takeaway, which is about shared experiences that other women have had, so that we can see our own blind spots. I often think we don't know what we're missing, and that's why we make certain decisions. So I want to ask you one more piece more about yourself, because we're talking a lot about financial boundaries today. What role have financial boundaries played in your relationships? Like, how have you navigated knowing the law, knowing all of the things you know? How have you navigated that within your own relationship?
Well, I always try to do what's comfortable for me. If something doesn't feel right, I'll try not to do it. And sometimes those decisions can be hard to make, of course. And then it also feels like boundaries shift as your relationship grows, and your roles within the relationship might change. But for me, I think open and honest communication, always, where you stand financially, is really important. And I also find that having the right experts in your corner really helps. Getting the right, counselors, financial advisors, accountants, legal team, to help you with supporting whatever decision you might make. I found that I'm not an expert in every area, so getting another expert to jump in to help give you advice about decisions that you might have to make, I found that to be quite important and useful.
Have you ever had a conflict from a financial, I mean, this is very personal, but have you ever had a situation in your own marriage where you've been afraid to have a boundary? Like where it's been one of those moments where you don't want to bring it up because you have some fear, and maybe that comes from cultural norms, or has that ever happened?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Is there any you
Yeah,
could share with us? Is there
it's
any that comes
yeah,
sort of forward immediately to you?
yeah. I don't know if I don't think I have a specific example to share, because there are so many. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know which one to choose. But I think sometimes saying no is hard. And maintaining those boundaries and sticking to them is hard. And so having communications, talking about, the reasons behind your decisions, and, being honest about how you feel about, certain values, or financial values at least. And then having an understanding for each other for that, I think, to help make it work. In a relationship. So, and then respecting those boundaries too, right? So, I think it goes both ways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, appreciate that. So, just some of the research we've done. Social and legal research suggests that women's difficulty setting financial boundaries is not personal failure, but structural conditioning. Gender norms continue to frame women as caregivers, mediators, emotional stabilizers within families, often positioning self-sacrifice as a moral obligation. Studies on household financial dynamics show that women are more likely to contribute unpaid financial labor, support adult children or extended family members, and delay asserting financial limits, ignoring their long-term security. Do you think the law protects women and their role as nurturers, Abby?
Um, I think when it comes to the children, it's always going to be what's in the best interests of the child in the courts. And if you're dealing with a separation or family law matter, unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you've birthed them. It's not that's not that one factor isn't enough to say that you're the better parent. So it's a non-exhaustive list that the courts will consider when it comes to the best interests of the child. So, I mean, if the woman is the nurturer, and it's in the best interest of the child to protect the nurturer, then yes, the court will protect the nurturer. But it's always what's in the best interest of the child. So, yeah, in that sense, the law would protect them.
Oh, so it would protect, yeah, okay, a woman but really they're protecting the children
Yeah.
mostly.
Yes.
Yes. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about some of the traditional roles and how we see these play out in real life and what we can do to protect ourselves. Okay.
Mhm.
And I do want to talk on this a little bit topic. I'll ask some questions about it more, but this concept of anticipatory law, right? And I do know that you work in the area of doing prenuptial agreements and things like that.
Mhm.
So I want to use an example. This is something that I do see often, which is usually a woman, usually a mother, who might have given up almost a decade of her life to care for an aging parent. It could be during her prime earning years, maybe 45 to 55, right? She's unable to focus on her career because she's spending both time and money taking care of one or two aging parents. And often they're siblings, but they're in another province. And they may be contributing a little bit financially, but there's not really a compensation to her for taking time out of her career, like there is, for example, when you're in a family situation and there is something compensatory,
Mhm.
and the estate doesn't really consider that, right? And a loss of income. Would you say it's a blind spot for women?
A blind spot.
Like, how would what do you say to this? What do you say to these listeners? Because there's hundreds of them out there
Yeah.
that
So
have to make these choices.
Yeah, so I can explain the difference between like family litigation and estate litigation. And in the family law context, we talk about the best interests of the child, and the court will always just make decisions based on what's for the best interests of the child. And we, didn't really talk about spousal support and compensatory spousal support. And how the courts would protect women who have given up their careers to typically women. I want to be more
Yeah.
gender neutral, but
We're very specific to women on this podcast, so we're not
yeah.
here to offend any men, but that's who our audience is. So
Yeah.
it's
So
okay to say that.
typically, but not always, it's the woman who stays at home, gives up their career, supports the man in their career, and takes care of the things in the home. So there is a claim for spousal support, and in some cases, compensatory spousal support. And that's when the courts will make an order for the person who has established their career and earns a living to pay support to the non-working spouse in the event there's a separation. So during the relationship there probably was some support, and so the courts will protect that going forward to maintain a certain level of support. But the thing is, what people don't know is you sometimes have to pay to get that support. So that's tricky, and that's where the anticipatory law comes in, where you would want to do like a prenup or a cohab agreement or marriage agreement to protect your rights, so you don't have to spend money later trying to get what you should be getting, because it works when the payor or the person who earns a living, has the integrity to maintain that and uphold that. But in some cases, they don't. So they might, have the benefit of you taking care of the household, and then upon separation say, well, I don't owe you anything. And then you've lost all those years, sometimes 15, 20 years. And then you have to go and pay a lawyer to get spousal support. Whereas if you had a prenup or cohab agreement from the beginning, it's established that you would just get it, and you wouldn't have to pay extra money to then go and get that support. So that's how it works in the family law context when it comes to, anticipatory law and compensation for the women who have given up their careers. And then you asked about
Okay, just pause 1 second, because
Sure.
this is big. Okay, this is
Mhm.
big.
Mhm.
So I'm a little older than you are, and got into my first marriage when I was 26. And I married an older man at the time. He's 10 years older than I was. And I made babies, and I did a little bit of work, but nothing substantial. So this is how much time has changed, in the sense that really we should have had a conversation prior to having our children to say, here's the role I'm going to play, here's the role you're going to play, and we both understand this, and God forbid our marriage breaks up, this is what it might look like. Are you actually seeing people come in and having those conversations with you today?
Tons,
It
yeah.
it just feels so fatalistic.
It's not very romantic. It's not something you want to think about.
So this is really important for our listeners, and whether it's mothers, grandmothers, or women in their 20s, that is becoming normal to have this conversation. I mean, once upon a time you went to the priest at the church, and you had education, and they said things like
Yeah.
you're not allowed to have sex before you get married, and you're not allowed to get divorced no matter what, right? Try again. And now the conversations are about, what does this look like, if we have a breakdown? Do we understand our responsibilities in this marriage and raising these children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you tell this woman to have that conversation with her husband, future husband?
A lot of the
Do they
women
come to you first and say, what do you think? Like, how do you approach this subject?
I think before they came to me, they've already had the conversation. So bless them.
But what about the people that aren't marrying a wealthy man? What about the people where they're starting out young, and the wealth and the income gets generated while they're married, and the roles happen over time?
I do get women who are younger and marrying into a relationship, and they want to know what it means, like from a financial perspective, when they get married, and that's great. So I love it when they book this 1-hour consult with me and just ask, what are my legal obligations after I get married? So that's perfect. And women these days, we're doing a lot of things. Like, some of us are, they want to be the stay-at-home mom. Some of them have businesses. Some of them have properties and investments. And so I'm getting a lot of, women, of all different backgrounds coming to, chat with me to talk about, what it would look like and how to protect your wealth, how to protect your assets, your own businesses. So there's all kinds of meetings that we have to with women before they get married, and that's great. It's great to see.
Do most of the women come to you before they've talked to their partner, or like in secret, and to find out how to talk to their partner? Like, do you give that advice as well, or Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people will be like, hey, this is discreet. It's all confidential. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we don't share any information with anyone. So some people will come and talk to us, maybe without telling their spouse, or maybe they've already told their fiance or spouse. They just want to get legal information. Nothing's wrong with that.
Wow. So I suppose in the work I do, I see the breakdowns where nobody ever had these conversations.
Hmm.
So and I think that's something important for our listeners to hear is that the really ugly breakdowns are because you weren't having these conversations during your marriage about your roles and responsibilities,
Yeah.
and um it's very interesting. So I want to jump just into that other piece, which is talking to the mid-40s woman. I want to bring it into the estate arena.
Hmm.
And does that story ring true to you at all that I had mentioned about, somebody who's potentially given up a lot of their own financial security to take care of their parents but are not compensated in the estate?
Yeah, it's a big emerging kind of like practice area these days because we have a lot of really like a population that's aging, and so um, the cases have come up. They're really interesting to see, and from what I gather, it seems that most of it is based on fairness, and so they're in the media lately or in the news. You're seeing these cases, basically from different cultures where the typically it's the woman who is being shorted. So, and they're also the ones who are doing probably mainly all of the work and caring for the aging parents. So, in those cases, you're seeing the courts sort of intervening through the Wills Variation Act. And Yeah, it's a big practice area in estate litigation these days, and it's kind of emerging because of the need.
So what do you say to this woman when she's going through it? Like, is it similar? Is it similar to the marriage aspect that she should be having these conversations with her family ahead of time?
Um, I mean, it would be good to talk to your siblings about that.
Hmm.
And
But
the
it's really the parent that writes the will, not the
yeah.
siblings.
Yeah, I mean, your siblings can also do the right thing after. And I mean, there's been cases where, the parents um, unfairly, let's say, distributed their assets, and siblings would give the other siblings an opportunity to do the right thing and share it fairly, and they just won't. So then that's when you would end up having to litigate. So yeah, having the discussion with the parents is great, but they can really write anything they want in their will. And in the end, they could take the care that you give them and then not give you anything.
Yeah, yeah. So research in preventative and anticipatory family law highlights that many legal crises emerge not from sudden conflict, but from years of unspoken expectations and informal financial arrangements. Verbal agreements, undocumented loans, shared property use, and intergenerational financial support often feel relationally safe until relationships change. When boundaries are not clearly defined early, women may find themselves financially entangled without legal protection. Supporting adult children without repayment structures, financing aging parents' needs without clarity or equalization. So I want to give you a couple of examples. So again, coming back to we are trying to share blind spots. We're trying to help people see them. Okay? One of the things I'm seeing most commonly in a lot of the work that I do, because I do a lot of work within divorce, is that um, when there's a marriage breakdown, one of the spouses, usually the woman, not always, it can actually, this one can really go both ways. The couple has been lifted by family wealth. a combination of here's money to buy your first home, here's money to buy your business, or there's a trust and it's funding some of the household expenditures, all of those things. And so suddenly now you're in a separation and you find out that all that family wealth, or 80% of it, isn't family wealth. What do we say? What do we say to the person in this arrangement?
Get a prenup.
So
Or at
how would
least,
a prenup even address that? It would, how would it address that?
yeah, it's super tricky. And so like we're litigating a lot because these things do happen. So, parents gifting properties or jewelry, mainly a lot of times in Vancouver it's property. And so when there's a separation, the argument is, what was the intention of that parent? Was it to give it to their own child? Upon separation, they wanted it back, or they want their son to keep it or daughter to keep it? Or was it meant for the couple as a family? And so that's a big area of contention and litigation. So you end up litigating that all the time and fighting over like the intention of the parents and whether it was meant for that one child or the family. So to prevent that from happening and spending tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation, to really have those conversations up front, and express the intention or even document it, and have a written agreement that talks about what would happen if you separated. Do you get to keep these properties, or gifts from third parties, or are they meant to be divided upon separation? So having those discussions early on, or when they're being gifted to the to the adult children, is really good, a really good idea. And having any kind of documentation to support that would be beneficial for everyone and to save on legal costs. And then just for you to know, in Vancouver, there's so many different merging cultures and different backgrounds. Your social expectations or your expectations of, financial boundaries, as we talked about, and how finances are to be managed. I think it's different across cultures. So, it's good to have those conversations early on.
Do you think that financial advisors are having these conversations with their clients? Or should be?
I recommend that my clients
Yeah.
talk to financial advisors. Especially upon separation, if they're saying they don't, they're confused or unsure or uncertain about, whether the settlement is good enough, or how to maintain your life going forward, and how to invest it, and if those questions come up, I definitely refer them to financial advisors. Like I said earlier, having a really good team of experts to back you up when you're making decisions is good. You got to trust the experts. You're not going to perform your own surgeries. So when you're managing a legal dispute, you use a lawyer. If you're managing financial issues, you use a financial advisor or an accountant. So I definitely think they're helpful, and I would bring them in.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really jumping out for me is that you could be marrying a wealthy man, but that does not mean that you're going to walk away wealthy in a separation. If it's being funded primarily by his family's wealth. And I do know that wealthy families know how to protect their wealth. They do have the advisors in place. And they're not going to side with the opposing spouse, even though it's the mother of their grandchildren, potentially. And I really think this is something that we need to talk about, that we need women to hear, that you could walk away with almost nothing if you haven't safeguarded yourself in whatever way you can, which really, it sounds to me like prenups are the biggest one. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the law does not protect you or a woman who's married to a wealthy man if it's all been gifted from the other family, right? I mean, really, and even if they do, you can be frozen out because you can't afford to pay the lawyer to go and argue it. And third of all, what a mess,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I think that's one other piece to talk about is the messiness of litigation and the years of that you can, lose of your life, and how difficult it is if you, versus having the conversations when you're friendly.
Yeah, so like you could do a marriage agreement within months. Like you can kind of negotiate it within like weeks or months and have yourself, protected. And then if you don't have a marriage agreement, and you divorce, you could end up, you know, tied up in litigation for years and years, and you're paying your lawyer an hourly rate for that. And it can be really, really expensive, shockingly expensive. And yes, if you're marrying into a wealthy family, they'll have the deep pockets to support their, child or adult child in litigation costs. But if you don't have that, it's going to be hard to go up against them. So it's almost easier to get them to pay for a prenup in the beginning. The ultra wealthy will always get a prenup. So if you're marrying into ultra wealthy, expect there to be a prenup because, rightly so, they're protecting their family assets or protecting their businesses. And they have the right to do that, and they're always thinking about that. They always have lawyers working for them anyways for other issues. So you're gonna probably be asked to sign a prenup, and so you can just negotiate something in there that protects you and your kids, and the difference between the two households don't have to be so different after separation, and that's something you can negotiate into your prenup if you're marrying into a wealthy family.
Do you think everybody should be getting a prenup? Every marriage should have one? I'm just curious. And culturally, is that even possible?
Culturally, I don't know about the different
Mm,
cultures, but as a lawyer, of course, I'm going to recommend that everyone get one.
yeah.
um,
This
you
is
know, and
eye-opening for me, Abby. This is
mhm.
very eye-opening. And
Well,
I actually think I would recommend it after this conversation to people.
definitely.
I've had a couple of meetings with younger couples in my practice, and I almost feel like saying to them, now we're going to be saving money, we're going to put together this plan, but if you get divorced, it's not enough. And because I see so many, it sounds absolutely terrible, right?
Hmm.
Like to plan your long-term savings plan contemplating divorce.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's not the right way to focus, but it's more than 50%, as I understand,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So this is very eye-opening for me,
Hmm.
um, to hear that, number one, it's becoming more normal. But back to, sorry, I spoke out of turn. Uh, should everybody have one? Are there any cases you shouldn't? And what about the cultural aspects of addressing this?
Um, so the benefit of having a prenup is that you're having the discussion up front and you're doing financial disclosure. So that's really important for, young couples or, if you're getting married or if you're living together. Because one thing we don't talk about is, debt. Like, under the Family Law Act, which is your built-in prenup. If you don't have a custom one, then the Family Law Act basically dictates what will happen if you separate, or the Divorce Act. And so if you don't like it, the recommendation is to get your own, right? And customize family law agreement, which will be upheld by the courts. And so the benefit is the financial disclosure up front, and know that, you know, we talk about division of family property after separation, but in some cases it's division of debt because, whatever property you accumulate during the relationship is family property that's dividable. But on the other hand, any debt accumulated during the relationship is also dividable. So in some cases, you end up paying to separate your legal fees and paying the other person's debt off. So, having safeguards in your family law agreement, or even talking about it. Okay, like if you accumulate a ton of debt, are you going to be responsible for it, or do you expect me to pay for half of it, right? Under the Family Law Act, you're paying half of it. So if you don't want to do that, you should have it in writing.
Yeah, that's very true. And as a financial advisor, where I would look at this would be that having that initial conversation with a lawyer helps people understand what their obligations are and how important it is to know what's going on. I I find that in some of the separations when I come in and I do work with clients as a neutral, that it's often the first time that that couple has sat down and really looked at their financial situation. And there's a lot of finger pointing because there's not enough, right? Where there's scarcity, even though you made all those decisions during your marriage or you didn't. Not making a decision is making a decision. And that's something that if you choose to have different roles and responsibilities, I think you still have to understand where you're at financially as you're as a family.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of the most common issues that you see that cause financial insecurity for women?
Causing financial insecurity for women. Not having the right skills and information. Having the skills to be self-sufficient and being able to support yourself. I think that gives women security because they're not depending on someone else. And then, again, the right team and the right support. So a good lawyer, a good financial advisor, a good accountant. And I would use them and their expertise and call them and ask questions and tell them to explain things to you that you don't understand. And once you have all that information, you'll feel more empowered and certain and confident with your decisions. And yeah, having the right team to support you, I think, makes a big difference.
Okay. I think that's really great advice. Uh, I always say that you don't have to know how to be a lawyer. You don't have to know how to invest money. You need to pick someone that you trust and that speaks at speaks your language, and that you're not afraid to ask questions, and that's really great, a great way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you become more learned about certain things. Definitely. Okay, so we're coming kind of close to the end here, and I want to ask you just a couple of quick questions here. So what advice will you be giving your own daughter or son? I believe you have a son and a daughter. Am I right?
Yeah, I have both. Um, yeah, if they're going to be living with someone or marrying someone, I would tell them to do financial disclosure. I would actually tell them to do couples counseling before getting married. You don't just go to counseling if you have a problem. You go to talk about communication, values, how you're going to manage finances during the relationship. What's the expectation? What are your values? What did you see in your family of origin that you want to bring to your new relationship or not bring to your new relationship? And I think it works from a financial perspective as well as a relationship perspective. So that's what I would advise my own kids, and also, talk to a lawyer, which would be their mom, about getting a co-op or marriage agreement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great to hear because, that's really coming from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I've already asked this question, but I want to reiterate it before we go, the question was really, what advice from your role as a lawyer would you give to our listeners today that might just be a life-changing experience? And I really think that is, go talk to a lawyer before you get married. Understand Understand the law around marriage. Don't go in blindly. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it saves on so much conflict. It helps prevent conflict. It helps prevent sky high legal fees. And, I think this might not be life changing, but, getting married is free. You just sign a certificate and you're married. Divorce is not free. Well, it can be, but it's hard. And so it's really expensive. Um, and I don't think people realize that. Like you're spending, thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands just getting a divorce. So really having that conversation up front is really like helpful. And, like I said, some separations can end up lasting for years. And if you have the property stuff dealt with, like the property and debt, like financial stuff dealt with before going into the relationship, then when you separate and you have kids, you can really focus on your kids and not fight over the money part of it, right? So I think that can be life changing for some people and for the kids who are, part of, when their parents are getting divorced. And for us, like 50% of our parents were divorced. So, we should be open to having those conversations so that we don't end up kind of in the same situations that our parents were in, right? So
Yeah, and if you can't have that conversation, maybe you shouldn't be getting married.
mhm,
I mean, really, I hate to say it, but if you're afraid to have that conversation about money with your spouse, I would say it's a red flag.
mhm. It's easier to do it in the beginning when you're still getting along than later when you're
Yeah,
mad
yeah.
and angry with each other.
Real reality check. So, the purpose of this podcast is for women to teach other women from our learned experiences. We don't know our blind spots, but we can learn from each other and limit those. So, I like to ask every guest this question. What was the most influential or significant decision or experience that you've made that has had a major effect on your financial journey? Maybe it's a learning experience, or maybe it's something you look back on and realize it was the best decision you ever made.
Best decision.
Or worst that you learned from, one or the other. Could be both.
Okay, I have a worse one.
Okay.
Worst decision. Well, the worst and best situation. The worst situation is not getting advice before making a decision. Not getting all the right information before making a decision. The best decision I've ever made was when I got the advice from not just one person, but two people or three people or four or even five in
Do you
like
have an
different,
example?
like a lawyer.
No, for you, personal.
Oh, a personal example.
Yeah. Did something
Oh,
happen
man.
for you in that regard?
I can't
Could have been a
even.
business decision where you didn't get enough information, or a very good business decision because you did.
Business decisions.
Well, any or
Well,
personal.
yeah, for business, I had um, like an accountant to explain taxes, and I had my husband who's my business consultant, and I didn't just go in blindly when I started my business. I got advice from a financial perspective, learned how to do budgeting, financial accounting, and get all the advice before going in, and that actually helped me feel more certain. When you're starting a business, it always feels like you're jumping into the ocean and you have no idea where it's going to go. So having a
Mhm.
good team behind you, I think is really helpful.
Awesome. That theme came through today. I really appreciate that. Abby, what an incredible conversation. And as we wrap up today, tell us where our listeners can find you.
Yeah, we have a website, www.illumalaw.com. That's ILLUMALAW.com. And our information is on our contacts page, including our email and phone numbers.
Okay, great. Really appreciate it. And for those of you listening, if today's episode helped you gain a bit more clarity on your own financial journey, please take a moment to support the show. The best way to help us grow is to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave a review. It truly helps other deliberate, savvy women find this community. Don't forget to download this episode so you can revisit these questions during your next financial planning session. Thank you again for spending your time with us today. Remember, your resources are your tools. Use them to create meaning and build your best life. I'm Jenny Weeks, and I'll see you in the next episode.